supermodel prostitutes everywhere that these guys are having sex with 24/7. And they're all photographed. They go to poker games where there's free prostitutes. That's come out. Where the top Pentagon brass are, the Watergate's just full of poker and gambling on one floor and supermodels on the next, all paid for by defense contractors. That came out with, Porter Goss and all the rest of it. That's just one level. They're allowed to insider trade. They're allowed to get all the no-bid contracts. They're just up there stealing us blind. They're a bunch of crooks. And those that aren't crooks are isolated and get slowly turned to the dark side. So that's what's going on up there. I mean, you ought to go hang out in D.C. You'll be sitting there in a restaurant and the most beautiful woman you've ever seen, and you'll see limousines pull up with old men in the back, lobbyists and politicians, and you'll see somebody's 22-year-old beauty queen daughter get in the back of the vehicle with them. That's what's going on, buddy. That's what's going on. Our stolen money bought them. All right, my friends, we have a guest joining us for the first time ever in the next segment, Larry Grathwohl, Inside the Weathermen. Incredible information coming up with Larry Grathwohl here in just a moment. But right now, let's continue with Ask Alex on this Friday. Your questions for yours truly. Let's go ahead and talk to Cindy in Illinois. Cindy, you're on the air.
Hey, that's me.
Welcome.
I have a question. A previous caller kind of asked the same question, but I'm going to word it a little bit differently. How is the system going to use our debt against us? Because the majority of Americans are in debt, either credit card debt, student loan debt, mortgage debt. So how are they going to use that against us?
They are changing all the different laws where the way they throw you in debtor's prison is claim you didn't turn in a silver spoon your grandma gave you when you declare bankruptcy, and they throw you in prison for it. They've changed the bankruptcy laws to where they're total fraud now, and bankruptcy is biblical, Jubilee, but they've just gotten rid of that. You've got countries in Africa that had $1 billion loan. They've paid back, $60 billion and still own $100 billion in interest. I mean, it's all fraud. They've got the Department of Education SWAT teaming people, and they don't even have any statutory power. It's not illegal to not pay back a student loan, but they still SWAT team you. I mean, that's mainstream news. Look it up, folks. So it's just total lawlessness where they want to bankrupt everybody and then make you agree to terms to go under government receivership, basically onto government debt forgiveness, where the government pays back your debt with other people's money and with inflation. And then you agree to take vaccines, to live in a smaller house, to do what they say. So it's a managed economy they're moving us to.
See, yeah, I'm a normal 27-year-old. I have a lot of student loan debt that I'm working to pay down. So I was just, that's just one of my worries.
Well, look, they're not going to be able to enforce this on everybody. And remember, if you borrow something from your neighbor, that hurts them if you don't pay it back. These mega banks have gotten over 30+ trillion now. The numbers don't really come out in the last few years. It was 27 trillion, and I saw Bloomberg saying I'm over 40 trillion. But they've gotten trillions of your tax money, which they then loan out to everybody at interest. And so, when I was in college and had no money and lived in a tiny one-room apartment, they would send me 2-3 credit cards a week in my mailbox. And then once I established myself, they don't ever send me credit cards. They don't send credit cards to people that aren't in debt. They want you in debt for life. It is predatory loan sharking at illegal loan sharking rates, and it's all a fraud. So, there's some schools of thought, and I'm not saying do this, but run up debt with Bank of America, Chase, all of them, do whatever you want, and never pay any of it back. Because it's all made up anyways. And I'm not saying do that, but that's what a lot of people are doing. That's what rich people do. Did you know that most rich people, so-called nouveau riche, they know how to declare bankruptcy, not pay things, all this stuff, and then they throw the book at little people. Most of the tax collectors go after folks making less than $30,000 a year. It's all just geared so the government class and the rich class can rip everybody off. But then they sell you the solution of higher taxes to get the rich, eat the rich, The problem is those are just going to be taxes on the working wealthy and the working middle class to give it to them in bailouts. You see how that's more sophisticated, but it's not a nice soundbite for CNN for class warfare?
Right. All right. Well, thanks for answering my question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't think, I mean, there's not much they can do to you if you don't pay off your so-called debts. I mean, they overcharge for most of these colleges. It was a Ponzi scheme. Most people aren't going to be able to ever pay it back properly, or you're going to be slaves for 20 years doing it. But you'll have bad credit for 7 years. So, I mean, what you going to do? I'd blow it all off. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Friday, again, the 13th day of July, 2012. I'm Alex Jones, your host. Thank you for joining us. Coming up in the next hour, gold to hit 2,000 by year end on more Fed easing, Merrill Lynch is saying. And see, they've artificially driven gold down, but that's always been the plan, according to all the experts I've talked to who I respect, is that they would drive it down, and then when QE3 came out, which we thought would be earlier this year, now they're saying it's going to be later this year, that it will cause inflation. So we're going to be going over that. Moody's downgrades Italy debt rating 2 notches. JP Morgan loses $4.4 billion on trades. Traders may have hidden losses. JP Morgan's been caught grabbing other accounts, not just MF Global. Amazing things happening. We'll also get into Condi Rice, who says she supports abortion. And that's who they're saying Mitt Romney, Drudge Report broke this yesterday, it's since been confirmed, that she's up at the top of the list. I mean, it's just horrible. So there you go. Might as well just be, how about he just runs as the new VP for Obama? But we're going to be joined here for the rest of the hour by Larry Grathwohl. We've played the clip many times over the years. I'm very honored to have him on with us. I think it's best if he describe who he is to you because his bio is so lengthy. But he was at the very top of the Weathermen and was able to, really help send him to prison. And, of course, the Weathermen have admitted what they did, bombing police, you name it, and then Bill Clinton let him out of jail. So just amazing. The type of stuff they engaged in, real terrorists, actually engaging in real terror attacks in America, and they're Obama's mentors. I mean, they paid for his houses, took care of him. It's incredible. But since we saw the new Army, document just a few months ago where they confirmed, yes, that's our real document for re-education camps in America. And now they're getting ready for all this. I mean, we need to understand they could try some type of takeover of America and arrest what they see as the counter-revolution. So we're going to talk to Larry here in a moment and give you his websites as well. But here he is in the 1980s documentary exposing what was going on at the highest levels of the Weathermen. Here's that clip.
I brought up the subject of what's going to happen after we take over the government. We become responsible then for administrating, 250 million people. And there was no answers. No one had given any thought to economics. How are you going to clothe and feed these people? The only thing that I could get was that they expected that the Cubans and the North Vietnamese and the Chinese and the Russians would all want to occupy different portions of the United States. They also believed that their immediate responsibility would be to protect against what they called the counter-revolution. And they felt that this counter-revolution could best be guarded against by creating and establishing re-education centers in the Southwest, where we would take all the people who needed to be re-educated into the new way of thinking and teach them how things were going to be. I ask, well, what is going to happen to those people that we can't re-educate, that are die-hard capitalists? And the reply was that they'd have to be eliminated. And when I pursued this further, they estimated that they would have to eliminate 25 million people in these re-education centers. And when I say eliminate, I mean kill. 25 million people. I want you to imagine sitting in a room with 25 people, most of which have graduate degrees from Columbia and other well-known educational centers, and hear them figuring out the logistics for the elimination of 25 million people. And they were dead serious.
That's from 1982, documentary No Place to Hide. The whole thing's online if you want to see it. Just type in No Place to Hide. Larry Grathwohl. His bio is so lengthy and all the things he's done so interesting. I'm not going to have time to go over it all, but Larry101st.blogspot.com, or just type in, we'll just put a link up in the guest area today. Will you ask them to actually put a link up at Infowars.com on his name to his website? Because, we do that sometimes for guests, especially if the website's long, instead of just mentioning it on air. We're going to add a link to his site where he has a lot of documentation there. And again, he helped put the Weathermen behind bars, and the Weathermen are quite proud of what they did. He was a Vietnam veteran, 1st Infantry Brigade in Vietnam, 101st Airborne Division. And we'll just start there. Larry, I want to, obviously look through the lens of what you witnessed inside the Chicago Communist Mafia back then versus who's in control today, because more and more what you've written and said, I look at what they're doing, and it looks like they're trying to do it, and it's, if they think they're going to get away with it, they're crazy. But briefly, tell us about yourself and what you experienced. Take us back to infiltrating the Weathermen at the highest levels, what you saw, and then bring us forward to today, what we're facing.
Well, that would be a long story, but essentially I had been discharged from the Army in 1968, and I was attending the University of Cincinnati when I was approached by members of what was then called the Weathermen, and they wanted me to go to Chicago with them for the attack on Chicago. It was called the Days of Rage. That was held on October 8th through the 11th of 1969. My first reaction was to think that these people were crazy. As a matter of fact, I even made a comment that, why go to Chicago to get the pigs? You can stay right here and get as many as you want. But they gave me a literature, and I took it home and read it, and ultimately wound up going to the Cincinnati Police Department to tell them about what I had encountered. And they asked me to go to some meetings, which I did. And what I found very astounding was that these people were extremely well organized. They were organizing people into what they called affinity groups of 4 or 5 people that would work together on the streets of Chicago. The sole purpose, as they overemphasized, was to attack the police and the establishment and property whenever the possibility existed. And while I didn't go to Chicago for this national action, the Weathermen themselves did everything that they said they were going to do. When they returned to Cincinnati, they got back in touch with me and asked me to start attending meetings again. And at that time, I went to the FBI. I had come to the conclusion that the Cincinnati police were not in a position to deal with this organization because of its national roots rather than it being local and confined to just Cincinnati. The FBI, of course, was somewhat astounded by the fact that I walked in off the street, and interestingly enough, they had my military file there on the desk when they interviewed me. And I think they were, kind of taken back that someone would volunteer to do this. Surprisingly, the Weathermen had attended meetings in Cuba in the summer of 1969, the early summer, during which the Cubans and the North Vietnamese had criticized them for what they referred to as white skin privilege. And they chided the Weathermen that they were